it's me, Sally, and today we're going to show you guys how you can temper chocolate at home. But before we do that, I thought you might like to see how it's done properly by the professionals. So we are here at B Chocolat in Brighton, and we're going to go inside, and Michelle Clement, who taught me how to make chocolate a couple of years ago, is going to show us how to do it, and then we're going to head back to the studio and show you how you can do it at home. Every single one of these chocolates, truffles and bonbons is crafted by hand right here in the B Chocolat shop in Brighton. There's not a machine in sight, which means all of the tempering is also done by hand using the traditional direct table method. Michelle has been making chocolate like this for over 20 years, which is why he's making this look so easy. The temperature needs to be absolutely spot on, but Michelle doesn't even need to use a thermometer. He just checks the chocolate against his body temperature. It's been a little while since I've used this method, so let's see if I remember how to do it. Tempering chocolate is all about reaching precise temperatures, so spreading it out on a marble surface cools the chocolate down quickly. And when the chocolate is tempered, each little caramel is coated by hand, which gives every one its own unique look. This was always my favourite thing to do. It feels like bringing life and character to each chocolate. And of course, it's important to taste test as you go. So maybe this was my favourite part. I really hope you enjoyed watching that, guys. And now we're going to head back to the studio and we're going to show you how you can do it at home on a nice small scale. You don't have to be dealing with that much chocolate. We've got a little bag of caramels made by yours truly for the train home. So let's head on to the studio. Okay, Nikki and I are back at the studio and we did eat all of our caramels on the train. Sam's quite upset about that, so it's okay because I'm going to show you guys how to temper chocolate at home and then he gets to eat the chocolate that we temper here. So what is tempering chocolate and why do we need to do it? Maybe you've heard of this term before, maybe you've had a go at it and it's not gone quite right. I'm going to explain to you what the process is, why we do it and how you can get it right every single time. So, chocolate that is in temper means that it is set at room temperature. So it's not soft, it's not melting. So if we take these chocolate chips, for example, we can see that they're not melting in my hand. Even if I was to pick one up and rub it between my finger and thumb, it is not melting. So this is in temper. And essentially what this means is that the cocoa butter crystals in the chocolate are in the correct formation so that they set at room temperature. Now quickly, let's just talk a little bit about ingredients in chocolate because there's so many different types of chocolate out there, different chocolate bars, different brands. And if you want to work with chocolate like this, if you want to create your own chocolate decorations or filled chocolates or whatever it is, you need to use a good quality chocolate. And you can tell by looking at the ingredients list on your chocolate bar, and the fewer ingredients, the better the chocolate. Chocolate is essentially two main ingredients. We've got cocoa butter and cocoa mass. These are the two ingredients that we get from the actual pure cocoa bean. And through loads of different processes, we separate those two and then we bring them back together to create our recipe for our chocolate. The other ingredients that will be in there will be some sugar, because otherwise we're left with a very bitter 100% chocolate, which is not very nice to eat. And that will be a different quantity depending on what kind of percentage of chocolate you're using or buying or eating. And then you might end up finding that there's some milk powder in it. If you're using milk chocolate, of course there's got to be milk powder in it. And then you might also find soya lecithin, which is just going to help to emulsify, but it's a very small amount. Anything else in there, if there's loads of other oils, you should never find other oils in your chocolate. That's a sign that it's not a good quality chocolate. So let's get on with the tempering. So basically we've got our chocolate chips here, but I don't want chocolate chips. I want to make maybe some chocolate shard decorations for my cakes, or maybe we want to make some chocolate caramels like we saw at Michelle at Be Chocolat do. And today I actually want to make some little chocolate bars. So of course we need to melt our chocolate chips to be able to do that. But what happens when we melt our chocolate is that all of those cocoa butter crystals come out of formation. And what we need to do is to force them back into formation so that we get our chocolate setting at room temperature. And that is the basic terminology and the rules around what tempering is. It's a set of instructions, a set of temperatures, and if we're hitting those, we know it's gonna set correctly. If it goes wrong, do not worry. It goes wrong to everybody, even like master chocolatiers who have been doing this their whole life. You talk to them and they'll say sometimes it just doesn't work, and it's completely fine. There's loads that you need to think about that might kind of play a role in that. So the temperature of your room, if it's really hot where you are, it's going to take a little bit longer. If it's very cold, it's going to happen very quickly. If it's very humid, there's lots of moisture in the air. Moisture and chocolate are not friends. So one day it might go right and one day it might not. So don't worry, you'll never waste your chocolate. You can just remelt it and start again. So before we get started, let me explain a little bit about what I've got here and the equipment that we're going to need today. So I've got my hob, and on top of my hob I've got a pan with some water in it. It's about half full, and there's a little bit of paper in there as well. I'll explain about that later. I've got my chocolate mold, so a nice sturdy plastic chocolate mold here. And I've got some cotton wool that we're going to use to clean the mold with. I've got a nice large metal bowl that we're going to use to temper our chocolate in. And then I've got 2 thermometers, but you'd only need one. I'm just going to show you the 2 different kinds. So you've got a probe thermometer that looks like this, and then we've got an infrared thermometer like this. Either one is fine. I've also got a nice sturdy rubber spatula, a piece of greaseproof paper, some scissors, and I always like to have a little bit of paper just to keep things clean as we go. I've got a small chopping board and a little knife, which we might need. Again, I'll talk about it later. We might not need them. I've got a couple of spoons, and then I've got a piping bag that I'm going to use to pipe the chocolate into the mold in. Now, the first thing that we're going to do before we get onto the tempering is prepare the mold. So maybe you're not using a mold, you can just pour your tempered chocolate out onto some baking paper or to some acetate, whatever you want to do with it. I'm going to use this lovely plastic chocolate bar mold here, but you probably can't see, but I washed this and it's got lots of kind of like smears on it. And we want to make sure it's nice and clean before we start using it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the mold above my saucepan of water, and I'm actually just going to get some of that steam all around the mold, and then I'm going to use some cotton wool to wipe all over it. So I'm just trying to take off any kind of smears, or maybe you've got some chocolate on there from last time you used it, or there'll be a little bit of cocoa butter on there as well. So you don't have to wash your molds. You can just make your chocolate, turn the chocolate out, and then before you use the mold again, you just want to give it a good clean like we are here. And if you are washing your mold, you need to be really, really careful. Don't use like a scour or something, because we don't want to get any scratches on the mold, because if we get scratches on it, it's going to show in our finished chocolate. So really, you don't actually need to wash the molds. You can just give them a good wipe out like this. Okay, so now we are ready to start tempering our chocolate, and there are a couple of different methods to do this. And the one that we just saw Michelle do, and that he taught me to do at Be Chocolat, is called the direct method, or it might be called the table method. It's a very traditional way of doing it. And for that, you need a big slab of marble, because the marble is going to cool the chocolate down, because marble is always cold. It's very fun to do. You can temper a lot of chocolate at once, and it's very quick as well. It's much quicker than the method that we're going to use today. However, you do need a big slab of marble. It's also very, very messy. If you've never done it before, you end up with chocolate everywhere. So we're not going to do that method today. We're going to do what's called seeding. It's much, much easier. You can do it at home. You can do it with small quantities of chocolate, and it's a lot easier to kind of get your head around. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to bring some water in this saucepan up to the boil so that it is hot, but then we want to turn the hob off because we don't want too much steam. The only thing we need to watch out for with this method is that we don't get any water into our chocolate, because if water gets into the chocolate, it's going to seize and it is going to ruin it. So the whole time we're working today, we need to make sure that no water is getting in the chocolate, and that also goes for steam, which is why I've brought my water up to the boil and then I've turned it off so that we don't have loads and loads of steam that could end up getting into our chocolate. So now we're going to start, and the first thing we're going to do is melt the chocolate, and we're going to melt it between 45 and 50 degrees C. And this is so important that we don't step outside of these temperature ranges all the way through, because it's these temperature gauges that is going to make our chocolate work. And if we get over 50, or if we don't get it high enough, so we don't get it to 45, it's not going to be tempered. So that is why you really need a good thermometer. So I'm going to start off by adding 300 grams of dark chocolate into my metal bowl here. And I'm going to put this into my hot water. You can see I've got a little bit of paper in the water, and that's just protecting the bottom of the bowl from getting too hot on the bottom of the saucepan. So I'm going to pop that in, and straight away I'm going to start stirring. So I've got my nice sturdy spatula here, and we want to keep this chocolate moving the whole time, because the chocolate that is closest to the bowl is going to start melting sooner, so we want to try and make it melt in a nice consistent way. Now you could do this process using a microwave, and then you don't have to worry about water getting anywhere. The only problem with the microwave is that we want to be very specific with our temperatures, particularly later on. So if we put it in the microwave for a little bit too long, even if we're just chucking it in for a second or so, we really can't control the temperatures. So this is why I prefer to do it over a bain-marie. And what I'm looking to do is to melt the chocolate fully so that there are no little bits of chocolate in there. And as you're melting your chocolate, you want to make sure that you're using your spatula to scrape all the way around the sides and the bottom of the bowl so that everything is getting combined. Okay, so those little tiny bits of chocolate chips are just about to finish melting. So I'm going to take the bowl off and I'm putting it onto some paper, because remember, we don't want any water anywhere. And I'm going to take my first temperature, and what we're looking for, remember, is between 45 and 50. Okay, so this is only at 39, which means we can put it back on the heat. Now, every time you put if you're using a probe thermometer, every time you put it in the chocolate, we then need to wipe it off. And we're just going to pop this on for about 5 seconds at a time. And I'm going to take it off again and test the temperature. So let's check this. I think it's probably there. So 44, 45. Perfect. We're going to stop there at 46 degrees. Remember, we don't want to go over 50, so ideally 46 to 48 is going to keep us in that safe zone. So wipe off my probe thermometer. So now what we need to do is we need to force the cocoa butter back into formation. So getting it to between 45 and 50 has meant that it's all very free-flowing and everything is out of control. So now we need to get some control back into our chocolate. So we need to drop the temperature. We don't just want to leave this, because eventually it will obviously cool down. We need to force it. We need to force those cocoa butter crystals to kind of take their correct form to let the chocolate set. So what we've got here is we've got some chocolate chips that are in temper. So this is in temper chocolate, and I'm going to use this to bring the temperature of our melted chocolate down. So in here I've got 100 grams, but I'm most likely not going to use all of it. Again, it will depend on the temperature of your room each day you do it. So I'm going to start by adding a handful like this of the chips. So maybe just under half. And what we're going to do is we're just going to stir. And we're just going to keep on stirring our chocolate, remembering to get all the way around the sides of the bowl and across the bottom. And we're looking to melt those chocolate chips. And when I'm stirring my chocolate, I'm not just stirring, I'm actually using the spatula to kind of smush the chocolate chips across the bottom and the sides of the bowls. And what we're looking for is to get this chocolate down to 31 degrees Celsius. It's very, very specific. So again, that's why I prefer not to use the microwave, because we can have a lot more control just using the hob here. And it might feel like the chocolate chips aren't melting, but just keep stirring, because it's the stirring and the movement that is going to help to temper our chocolate. Okay, so I think that all of those chocolate chips that I've added have melted. So now I'm going to check the temperature of this chocolate. So I've got a reading of 33, 34. So I want to get it to 31, which is only 3 degrees away. So we need to add a little bit more of this seed chocolate into our melted chocolate here, but I don't want to add loads because it's never going to melt. So I'm actually going to add 2 chocolate chips. We're going to pop those in and we're just going to keep stirring. And those again are going to melt down and it's going to bring that temperature down, hopefully to 31. So I'm going to give this a final check. And if you've reached your 31 degree target, but you've still got a little chocolate chip in there, then you can just fish that out. What we want to make sure we're not doing is getting any of this chocolate that started to set around the top of the bowl back into the melted chocolate mixture, because that's going to mess around with our temper. So before we go ahead and form our chocolate bars or chocolate caramels or whatever it is we're going to do, we're going to test it, because we can change the chocolate, we can redo the whole process if it's not tempered. But if we put it into our molds, we let it set, and then we realize that it's not right, then it's going to be just a bit of a time waste. So I'm going to use a spoon, or you can use a palette knife or anything you like. I'm just going to dip the end in, shake it off, and I'm just going to leave it upside down like this to set. And what we should see happening is the chocolate setting less than 3 minutes time, hopefully quicker than that. But if it's taking longer, if it's like 5 minutes and it's still not setting, we know that it's not in temper. So we're just going to keep an eye on this spoon, and then at the same time just keeping this chocolate moving. So as you can see, this chocolate on the spoon has already started to set. So you've lost that kind of glossiness from the melted chocolate, but we still have a little bit of a sheen to it, which means we are now ready to pipe out into our chocolate mold. So I've got my piping bag here, turned upside down to make it easy to get the chocolate into. And now this is important that we make sure when we pick up our bowl, we don't have lots of water around the edge, because remember, chocolate and water are not friends. And I'm going to pour this into my piping bag. And when you're pouring it into your bag, remember, we don't really want to scrape around the sides too much. We don't want to get any of that set chocolate in there. But don't worry, we can still save this. We're not going to waste it at all. We can just remelt it and use it again. So twist the end of the piping bag, of course. And then we need to turn our mold the right way around, snip off the end. The smaller you make the hole, the more control you're going to have. And then we're just going to start piping. And we need to do this quite quickly, because remember, you saw how quickly this chocolate was setting on the spoon, so we need to work fast. And what we're going to do now is we're going to tap and shimmy the mold. So we're putting a little bit of vibration in there to smooth out this chocolate, get rid of those piping lines. And as you do this, you might see some air bubbles appearing, which you can pop with a toothpick or the end of your probe thermometer. And now that all of that is smoothed out, if you want to add any kind of sprinkles or nuts or fruit or whatever you like, I'm going to add a little bit of salt to mine just to give it a little bit of a salty kick. I'm just going to add a few sea salt flakes on top, but you could add anything you want to. Now all we need to do is cross our fingers and pray to the chocolate gods that we have made some beautifully tempered chocolate bars. So this is going to start setting really quickly, and I can already see it's starting to set around the outside. This term is also known as crystallization. So if you come across that term, basically it just means setting the chocolate. So I'm just going to leave it at room temperature until it's fully set. Okay, so the chocolate has now set, and another good sign to know if your chocolate is tempered correctly is that whilst it sets, it will start retracting away from the mold. Or if you've poured it out onto some paper or some acetate, that paper will have sort of like started to peel upwards like this, and that's a good sign. So hopefully these are just gonna fall straight out. Let's give it a go, here we go. So I'm gonna do it on some greasy paper. Oh my goodness. Beautiful. Pretty happy with that. Nothing left on the mold. Nice. And so I wouldn't wash this. What I would do is just give it a wipe down like we did at the beginning of this video with some cotton wool. But let's just look at this chocolate. It looks lovely and shiny. Shall we snap it? Right close to the microphone. Oh, stunning. That is the sound of well-set chocolate. And last of all, let's just give it a little taste. It's also not sticky. I'm able to handle this and it's not melting in my hands. Again, another sign that we have correctly tempered our chocolate. Now, what I want you to look out for when you're doing it is you might end up, particularly if you've piped your chocolate in, you might end up with a few little smears of cocoa butter on the outside of your chocolate, but that does not mean that it hasn't tempered, okay? As long as it is set at room temperature, it's not sticky, and we've got that beautiful snap, you've done it. So you can now go away and you can temper chocolate and you can make chocolate bars, you could make some lovely chocolate gifts for Christmas, you could do some filled caramels, you could do caramel bars. Nikki and I were just talking about that and what a good idea that sounds, so maybe I'll give it a go and I'll show you guys how we get on. But don't let this scare you. I know I was always really scared about tempering chocolate, but it's a set of instructions. You gotta reach some temperatures. As long as you do that, you're gonna be fine. So good luck, enjoy. I'm just gonna eat all of this chocolate, which I could absolutely do. No problemo. Oh yeah, sorry, Sam just pointed to this. This is my favorite trick about this, is if you've got a piping bag and you piped your chocolate in, there's still chocolate in there, don't throw the piping bag away, let it all set, and then it all comes out like this, and you can just reuse it. But also, that's quite cool, isn't it? Oi! It's his, he deserves it.